It is 6 o'clock and we are in the auditorium. We're going to start tonight with a public hearing, and this is a variance application for 8 and 10 Angus. This is submitted by Tom and Debbie Ray. It's an application for variance in building density and lot size for new construction of a single-family home at 8 Angus and a single-family home at 10 Angus. So we're going to go ahead and open up this meeting. I did want to ask, Kyle, did you have anything significant that you wanted to tell the commission before we have the applicants come up?
I don't think so.
Okay, so reading through the actual application, I know y'all have been here before, so this is not the first attempt at this. But I did want to point out that there was some information in your packet related to the fire department being able to go in and out on that street.
Yes.
And I'm trying, to find the actual wording on this.
Here
But
it
it
is.
says-
I'm happy to report that our current fire engine, as well as our ambulances, can easily maneuver and turn around on Angus Street. Do you want me to read the whole email? Or
Yeah,
is
go
that-
ahead with the whole
Okay.
thing.
I will be requiring the property owner of the turnaround spot to place signage that it is an emergency vehicle turnaround and not a parking spot. That is from the fire marshal to Kyle Palmer.
Right. So that is an addition since the last time we were here. I know there were several questions about whether or not the fire truck and emergency services could turn around on that particular road. And there were also some questions about the width of the street itself. Do you want to add anything to that? Or are you good?
No, I have nothing to add to that. I do have a staff report with some information when we get there.
Okay.
But I also have 3 letters for public comment also.
You have
3 letters.
Okay, let's do the public comment towards the end. I'll do that. So let's go ahead and give the applicants an opportunity to give an overview of what they're trying to do on those particular lots, and then we'll, as a commission, be able to ask them questions if you have any.
Okay.
So go ahead. Do you want to just state who you are?
Yes, it's Tom and Debbie Ray. We run the Woods Cabins on Wall Street. We have the 2 lots on 8 and 10 Angus. And you can see, I believe we left you the plans of the 2 houses we want to build. One is they're both single-family residences. One is a little under 1,000 square feet, and that's going to be our home. We're planning on putting our place up on the market. It actually went on the market today. And once that sells, we're going to be moving over to that house, and the other one, we're planning a single-family residence for a long-term rental.
And then it's about 700 square feet is what that house will be.
About 750 square feet.
700 square feet, it's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath with
Okay.
a porch. We're making outdoor living since the house is 700 square feet. We wanted to give it a little bit more.
Okay, so originally they started out, like I said, they've been here before. They started out with a much bigger building.
Yes,
and we were
initially
going
it was two
Correct.
small homes. So we
Right.
wanted initially to put 3 houses on those 2 lots. And that was a problem because the 2 of the houses were only going to be 10 feet apart. We didn't realize there was a 20-foot rule. So we changed that to a duplex, which was about 1,400 square feet. And so that wasn't light, so we're cutting down to the single-family house.
Small, half the size.
Right.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for them on this new plan as they have it stated in our paperwork? No, okay.
Can I ask one quick question on the signage for when you were reading that note from the fire marshal, is that something that we should provide and post on that?
I
Or does
think
Sandy need
it-
to do that because he's the property owner?
Let me just read again what it said, because I think it was up to, it says, I will be requiring the property owner of the turnaround spot
Okay.
to place signage that it is an emergency vehicle turnaround and not a parking spot.
So would it be okay for me to reach out to him to find out where I can get this sign and then talk to Sandy Okay, you don't
Yeah,
care.
I mean,
as
I'm
long as
sure
we
you
make
could
it happen.
probably work something out with
Okay.
them, but
Yeah.
as it states
We
here,
talked
to
to him a lot.
me, it reads as if the owner of that property will be required to
Got it.
do that sign.
We can make
Can I
sure
jump in
that's-
here?
Yeah, if you want to ask them questions, go ahead.
Just so it's clear, I did get with Simon, Public Works Director, and he will be installing that sign, and he will also be installing either a dead end or no turnaround sign at the beginning of that
So
street.
because it's a
good.
city
Awesome.
street,
Oh, good.
Public Works is going to take
Yeah,
care of that.
Simon said he would take
Okay,
care of that.
there's your answer.
Awesome.
Did y'all mention last time that the turnaround was on private property, not on city property? Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah. So if you don't count the first 7 feet of that.
So, I mean, so the person that owns that property could, I guess, put it back in the, prohibit y'all from using it since it's not a public street right now?
No,
That was part of his agreement
with Glenn,
with Glenn Crenshaw. He put that, he built that so the fire department would be having a turnaround when
Yeah.
he first built those 8 years ago.
But who owns the turnaround?
Dwayne Sands.
Dwayne
Who?
Sand,
Dwayne Sands. He goes by the name Sandy.
Sandy.
He lives right across the street in one house over from us.
So I guess the question is, what if that person refused to let y'all use the parking turnaround anymore? Then you would only have a 17-foot street there with no way to turn around.
But that would affect all of the houses on the street, just not our 2 houses. That would be a whole neighborhood issue.
Well, I'm just saying that this,
Yeah.
that the turnaround, you're saying the turnaround is there, but the hammerhead is there, but it could become private property again.
Kyle, do you have any
Yeah, I have
feedback
some insight on
that?
that. So I did meet with the city attorney after the last application was denied. His stance is the burden of the street with no cul-de-sac, the width of the street, the design of the street, that burden cannot be placed on this application.
Does that answer your question?
No, not really. What did that? Go again. I got lost there.
Yeah, so the street development should have been taken care of by the developer or the city, but that's not their responsibility.
But if we're saying the fire truck can turn around down there, if you lose the hammerhead, the fire truck can't turn around. If the hammerhead's on private property, it needs to be deeded to the city if we're going to say, well, the fire truck can turn around, because if it goes away, the fire truck can't turn around.
Right, and that is a question that should come up in future development, but it should not affect a
Well, it does
decision on
affect
this.
it.
It doesn't affect the private homeowner who purchased the private lots. That burden can't be put on them for building, is the point, that the city needs to go back and develop the street properly, and that is not their responsibility.
But if we're conditioning the permit on the fact this fire truck can turn around, if the hammerhead goes away, the fire truck can't turn around. So it is our responsibility, because we're basing something on something that may go away. Unless there's a
Yeah, that would have to be brought up in future development of that property.
Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay. All right, so we're going to go into public comments. So Kyle, you said you had a couple, do we have anybody that signed up for public comment that is here?
Yes, I have Carrie Mary is here for this application.
Okay, so let's do that first, and then we'll read. You've got, how many do you have to read?
3 letters.
Okay, so we'll do the public comment of the people that are here for now, and then we'll read the letters after you're done. So just state your name and your address, please.
So my name is Carrie Mary, and for 6 years I lived at 52 Wall Street, right across the street from Tom and Debbie Ray. And for the last year, I live on 52 Wall Street, number B. But I've lived on Wall Street for a total of 16 years. I was not given any kind of notification as part of the neighborhood who could comment on their request to make their building initially, because I guess I'm just slightly outside of that range. But as someone who lives right in that neighborhood and right next to them, I felt it was really important that I came up and was able to speak for these 2 wonderful people, because my understanding of the last meeting was it was almost as if a pack of wolves disguised as neighbors came to speak for them. I've done building in town with a partnership. I know what a planned unit development is. I know that Glenn Crenshaw put together a planned unit development there. He would not have gotten approval if the fire department hadn't been able to do a turnaround. At the time, I believe it was Mr. Kelly that was our police chief, and he was meticulous about the safety of residents. I'm really surprised that this has become such a point of contention when Tom and Debbie Ray have simply bought 2 lots in an established neighborhood. It's been there now for 8 years. Other people have bought their lots and their houses, and they're living there happily. So I just feel that somehow something got all kind of messed up here. They're just great stewards of the property that they currently live in, and they are phenomenal people and great neighbors. And whatever they do at 8 and 10 Angus will be top quality, totally respectful, and a beautiful addition to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kyle, do you want to read all of them? Or do you want to pass them on?
It's just a short list this time.
Okay.
I'll do this.
All right.
Thank you, though. So the first letter is from Dwayne Sand, who does own that property that is across the street. He says, Kyle, I'm writing to let you know I totally approve of the homes that Tom and Debbie Ray are wanting to build across the street from my property. They will be good neighbors, and I'm sure good landlords as well. Thanks and regards, Dwayne Sand, 56 Wall Street, Eureka Springs. We understand the Rays have a lot of issues with the zoning codes, et cetera, on Angus. However, we believe the Rays should build to the environment of the residents on Angus Street with front lawns, not concrete with side parking. Thank you for your consideration of our concern. Please read this letter at your city planning meeting and include as a protest. Thank you, Monica and Charles Longnecker.
And what address were they at? Or
They did not list it on this one, but I do have
Okay,
another letter from
in
them.
our list.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And then the last one says, Kyle, I'm writing once again to support Tom and Debbie Ray's plans to build on 8 and 10 Angus. I thought the first 2 plans were fine, and I'm not sure why they need approval for the most current. The opposers seem to want one house on each lot, and that's what they are planning. So what needs approval? Isn't that what the lots were zoned for? I have never received a letter for the last 2 houses that were built on the street. Everything looks good with the latest plans. Someone previously mentioned aesthetics. These homes look nice, and I believe they will enhance the look and character of the street. Apparently, some people have a problem with renters. I think most people have rented at some point in their life, and some prefer to rent. Just because someone buys a home doesn't mean they will be a good neighbor, and you can't choose who will purchase that home. I'm sure the Rays will choose renters carefully, and if they turn out horrible, they can evict them. As far as traffic is concerned, I thought it was the worst argument of all. I've lived on Angus full-time for 2 years and 4 years before that. Sometimes I don't see a single car go by my house all day and very few on a busy day. I've once and only once passed a car at the top of the hill and there was room enough to pass. The street is narrow just like Wall Street, Spring Street, and the majority of streets in Eureka. The difference is there's little to no traffic on Angus. So a few more people living on Angus should not create a significant problem. And they could put a sign at the top of the hill that says dead end, no turnaround. They could also put a no parking sign on the turnout that is halfway down the street. 12 letters were sent out and 3 came back against, 2 were for, and the other 7 didn't respond. I would assume that those 7 don't care. And someone on White Street sent a letter. Since this isn't about White Street or any street close to it, that letter is pointless. Someone mentioned that there is no homeowner named Sally Shaw at 60C Wall Street. That is true. I don't know who Sally Shaw is. Sally Rugen, my sister, is the owner, and she is the one who sent a letter. The fire marshal came out and saw no problem. The lots were zoned to build homes on, and that is what the Rays want to do. So why are they having to go through so much of this to get approved? They're really nice people and will be great neighbors. They will build nice-looking homes and take good care of them, so why don't people go find some real problems to deal with? By the way, if they are so worried about safety, when will Angus get a street light? Thanks for listening to this letter. Sincerely, Ann Shaw for Angus.
Is there anybody else for public comments? Okay. Any of you have any questions before we close this meeting? All right, so we're going to go ahead and close this public hearing. Can I get a motion to close in a second, please?
I make a motion that we close the public hearing for the applicant.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing this public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so let's go on to roll call.
Peter Graham,
Here.
Susan Hallman,
Here,
Ann Salee,
she is absent with notice.
Fergie Stewart,
Here.
Joe Hill,
Here.
Megan Morris.
Here.
I'm present, Tom Buford.
All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to move into the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Can I get, take a look at the agenda? We have one item on it. Can I get an approval of our agenda?
Make a motion as we approve the agenda as written.
Second?
All right, we've got an approval and a second. Do we have any public comments for our Board of Zoning and Adjustment meeting? Kyle, did you have anything? Not for this one, right?
I do have a staff report for this one.
You do have a staff report for
I
the
do.
Board of Zoning?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so since I don't have any public comment, let's go ahead and go into yours.
So the application for variances at 8 and 10 Angus, owners are Tom and Deborah Ray. The request is for a variance in building density and lot size requirements at 8 and 10 Angus. Staff does recommend approval to this variance request. Background executive summary, the subject property at 8 and 10 Angus subject property at 8 Angus contains approximately 4,600 square feet, and the property at 10 Angus contains approximately 4,300 square feet. Both lots are located in the R2 contemporary residential zone, which requires lot sizes to be 10,000 square foot with a building density not greater than 4 dwellings per acre. This property is currently undeveloped. Surrounding properties are zoned R2 with building density greater than 4 dwellings per acre and lot size variances less than 10,000 square foot that were never approved through the Planning Commission. The proposed design meets building and fire code for setbacks and parking requirements. The applicant is requesting variance to building density requirements and lot size requirements in the R2 zoning to accommodate new construction of 2 new homes. The home at 8 Angus is proposed to be approximately 800 square foot. 10 Angus is proposed to be approximately 1,400 square foot. 2 notes. One we discussed after the last meeting that their application was denied. I met with the city attorney. 2 things that he wanted us to know is the building pattern in the neighborhood has already been established with variances in density and lot size requirements. And concerns with street design and accessibility are burdens that cannot be placed on a single application.
Does anybody have any questions regarding what Kyle just read? Does anybody have any other questions for the applicants, if we were to allow them to come up?
Okay.
Okay, so this is their application is for 8 and 10 Angus. This is submitted by Tom and Debbie Ray, which we've mentioned already. Let's just move into, we're going to vote yes or no as to whether or not you approve this particular application. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and we'll do a, actually, let's do a,
Roll call.
pardon?
Roll call.
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
Does there have to be
Peter? Here. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Oh, hold on, just one second. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, my brain's gone tonight. Let's get a motion and a second to approve.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we approve the variance application for 8 and 10 Angus Street.
Second?
Thank you. All right, so we've got a motion and we've got a second to approve 8 and 10 Angus, this variance application. All those in, well, go ahead, Kyle, go with your.
Peter's yes, Joe's a yes. Tom?
No.
Ferguson?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
That's 4 yeses.
Okay, do you just want to go through everybody? Did you already get everybody out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then I don't have to vote. Okay, all right. All right, so this one is approved at 8 and 10 Angus. Let me just go ahead and,
Tom and Debbie, congratulations.
It's a big difference. They're not the last one.
what was it, 4? 4 ayes. This is a regular. What is the date? Oh, it's the 11th, isn't it? And then Kyle, do you want to follow up with them if they want a copy of that and anything else?
Yeah, yeah, we can talk tomorrow morning and make a plan to meet up.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn our Board of Zoning Adjustment meeting?
I make a motion that we adjourn the Board of Zoning and Adjustment.
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to move into our Planning Commission meeting. Can I get an approval of the agenda, or can I also get anybody who wants to add or change anything?
I'd like to add a city council meeting last night to the agenda.
You want to add the city council meeting to the agenda? Okay, so we'll add that as number, well, let's see what our number is right now. I think we've got a couple things that we're going to postpone on here too, so let me just write this and then we'll figure it out. We'll add that at the end. I know that, let's see, under unfinished business, we were doing a definition of unit. That has been postponed. That was something that Ann was working on, and she is not here tonight, and she did not submit anything at this time. The other item that's on our list is under commission business number 2, the approval of the minutes from the March 14th regular meeting. Those have not been finished yet, so we're going to remove those. And then we do have some information on number 6, which is our discussion about short-term and long-term rentals. But Jacob was planning on being here. He's not going to be here, but he did provide some information for you in the packet, which we can discuss as well. But just FYI on that. So I think your item would become number 9.
Okay.
So we'll add that to the end. All right, can I get a motion and a second to approve it as we have discussed?
Right. I make a motion that we approve the amended agenda as discussed.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, let's go into public comments for Planning Commission meeting. I believe, did you have a letter or did you have somebody who wanted to comment here?
So I do have a couple people on the public comments sign-up sheet, but it is not related to new business listed here, but I do have a letter for.
Okay, well, the order, since we're doing public comments right now, do you want to move that, or are you okay with them doing it now, before we get into the list of items on our agenda for planning?
Yeah, we can do it however.
Okay, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it.
Okay, start with the letter.
Sure.
Okay. From John and Sharon Williams, trustees of Clark and Williams Conservation Trust at 127 Breezy Point Drive. Dear Planning Commission, first, thank you for letting us comment. FYI, Sharon and I purchased Howard Williams Place on Breezy Point nearly 2 years ago this summer and began restoring the old homestead while also recycling some 23 tons of salvage materials on the property. One of our goals was to preserve as much of the natural environment as possible, and so we created a conservation restrictions for most of the property. Unfortunately, we've had some problems at the street. Surprising because there are already many well-written codes and ordinances that should have governed these issues. In my experience, an evenly applied set of rules and guidelines creates harmony and goodwill among neighbors. Poorly enforced regulations creates the opposite. We've often heard the familiar adage, better to do what you want and ask forgiveness later. In other words, see what you can get away with because nothing will happen if you get caught. This is gross disrespect for your neighbors, citizens, and many thoughtful individuals who donated many hours into developing fair and balanced guidelines to benefit everyone. And disrespect breeds more disrespect until you have a situation like that on my street. First, a few trees cut down, then one little shed moved into the front yard, then 2, then 3, then 1 trailer, then 2, a blinding spotlight, then 2 spotlights, and a few extra cars on the road, then more cars, then the green space plowed up for more parking, then boulders stacked out in the road, keeping us from using our own drive. Now full-time tenants living in a shed on cinder blocks with 0 setback, using about half the right-of-way as their new front yard, and a new line of boulders blocking any other traffic from using that portion of the road. Where does this stop? But ending on a positive note, thank you so much for engaging Jacob, Kyle, Simon, and Ida. This team is outstanding, professional, courteous, motivated, and highly skilled in many ways. Well done. Looking forward to the next 2 years. John and Sharon.
And what was that address again?
127 Breezy Point.
Okay, thank you. Any others that you have?
Not that I have.
Okay, is there anyone that has public comments out there? And this is for Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address.
Oh, hi, I'm John Rankin. I'm co-owner of 1 Washington Street. Excuse me. The definition of innuendo, an elusive or oblique remark or hint, typically a suggestive or disparaging one. I was not here for the last Planning Commission meeting.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you real well.
Sorry. Sorry. Should I start again?
Sure,
Yes, please.
The definition of innuendo,
that's good.
an elusive or oblique remark or hint, typically a suggestive or disparaging one. I was not here for the last Planning Commission meeting, but read what was reported in the Eureka Springs Independent. From the newspaper, I quote, "During the commissioner's comment, Tom Buford mentioned City Council's discussion of a property at 1 Washington Street. That property had burned and the owners are restoring it. Buford said the owners suggested that the city codes should not apply since they were providing affordable housing. Buford wondered how much time elapsed after the fire before the property was inspected. He also asked if the owners began repairs before getting the necessary permits. Buford said the owners complained that building official / code enforcement officer Jacob Coburn's standards were too strict, and compared that to someone saying, 'I've lived here all my life and the other policeman never gave me a ticket.' Elusive, suggestive, disparaging innuendo, it sure comes off as that. When I approached Planning Coordinator Kyle Palmer at City Hall in front of the Mayor's assistant Kim Stryker with said newspaper in hand, I asked if anyone on the commission can just make up stuff about anything they want. Kyle responded with a very big grin on his face, saying, 'Yes.' That was followed by Ms. Stryker saying, 'We have Mickey Schneider to blame for that.' As far as I know, neither Bill, this innuendo was put out there to make us look bad, and now it makes you look bad. Nobody wins here. As far as I know, neither Bill nor I have ever met Mr. Buford, and I'm not sure where he's getting his false information from, but this is the second time we have requested that planning approach us directly regarding the renovation of 1 Washington Street. We are happy to answer all your questions or concerns. And so I'm respectfully asking planning to please consider the consequences of your words, whether intentional or not. I can't speak on my own integrity, but I can speak on my husband's. Bill's not asking for special treatment. He has been working hard on this project and trying to play by the rules that keep on changing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comments? Just state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Bill King, and 1 Washington Street. Contrary to statements made by a couple of members of this commission, we have followed all city procedures as they were set up at the time, got required building permits, and have not tried to evade building codes or get special treatment. The first thing I did post-fire to help decide whether to rebuild or tear down was to come to City Hall to make sure I could continue to operate as non-conforming multifamily. I worked with your employee, Kylie, the then building inspector and the city attorney to ascertain that the building was not 50% destroyed and would therefore retain its zoning status. Using repair estimates from the insurance company, it was determined by all those city employees that the destruction was about 30% and there would be no issue with zoning. I'm told now by Kylie's replacement, Kyle, that the non-conforming use is threatened because we're not keeping the place up and that we've altered the structure. The building only looks as it does because I was forbidden from working on it for more than 3 months. Had I not been shut down, the building would be finished and we wouldn't be here tonight. When the project was shut down, the city hired a new building inspector. He decided the building had major structural issues and was dangerous. Before starting to rebuild, I worked with an architect and consulted with several construction experts who all agreed the building was sound. At the new building inspector's insistence, I hired a structural engineer who also concluded the building is sound. We have never asked not to follow building codes, only that the building inspector follow the applicable International Building Code for existing buildings rather than for new construction. Those codes clearly states our project qualifies as an existing building since it wasn't 50% destroyed. Regarding the alteration cited by Mr. Palmer, there was a room perched atop the rear of the building, accessed by a long, narrow staircase that was totally consumed by the fire. I always thought the room was a fire trap and kept the stairs to it locked off from our tenants. The fire marshal wisely ordered that the room not be rebuilt, and the architectural plans we submitted to Kylie before reconstruction began clearly showed the room would be removed and explained the reason. Somehow those plans vanished from City Hall, along with documentation of the decision that was made regarding the non-conforming use. Since we had no choice but to remove the room, I don't see how that alteration can be used against us. Regarding parking, there has never been a parking issue for our tenants. Because of the convenient location, many of our tenants don't need cars. There are 4 spaces on the street that are usually open and always plenty of parking at the top of Mountain Street, just around the corner. We are committed to providing safe, clean, nice, affordable rental housing. When finished, these apartments will have all new, up to current code electric, plumbing, central heat and air, and 3 hardwired interconnected smoke detectors in each unit. They will all be, I'm on my last sentence.
That's your 3. Thank you.
They will be all electric, no gas on the property, and much safer than most buildings in Eureka. That said, I do want you to understand that the fire had nothing to do with gas, electrical, or structural issues. It started on the outside, under a deck, either by an errant cigarette or by someone setting it. And I was told we were going to be on the agenda tonight.
Your time is up, Bill.
We're not going to be on the agenda, so I just wanted to make these statements tonight to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so anyone else for public comment? All right, so we're going to finish on public comment, and we're going to move into new business. We have a show cause on 17 Breezy Point regarding their conditional use permit. So we have several items that are on here. This is a violation of the conditional use permit issued to Cecilia Athey on June 8th of 2021 for 1-unit tourist lodging in the R2 in an R2 residential zone. We have several items that are on here. I'm going to go ahead and list them out, and then Kyle, if you want to go ahead and give your we've got just so he can point out the items that are on the list that he sent. So we have A, which is a non-compliance of building code requirements. B, which is change of use from 1-unit tourist lodging to long-term rental. C is change of use from 1-unit tourist lodging to 2-unit tourist lodging without approval from Planning Commission. D, which is change of use to include wedding venue without a CUP. Letter E is change of use to include event center without a CUP. And then F is change of use to include food service without a CUP. And I know that Kyle sent out or gave us some information on this particular property. This is a property that was permitted for a 1-unit tourist lodging in R2, and this was back in June of 2021. So I'm thinking some of you were on the commission at that time. Tom, I know you were. Fergie, you were, correct? Ann was, but she's not here. Megan, were you on
I was not.
planning at that time? Okay. And then Peter, you weren't, and I was not either, so. There is a staff report that was given to you by Kyle. Does everybody have that? Were you able to review that, or do you need to take a few minutes and read through that? Did you find it? I can give you mine here. It's right here on top. So the first 2 pages, if you want to review that. So just to take a few minutes and just read through that, just so you're clear as to what the staff report says. Megan, have you had enough time
Yeah.
to go through it? Okay. All right, so there's quite a few things here. I'm going to address a couple things. There is, or there was originally the one tourist lodge. This is a tourist lodging, so it's not a B&B. One was approved. There happened to be a change that was an administrative error at City Hall that changed this from a 1-unit to a 2-unit. That was addressed with the property owner. And then there was I do have a question about this, though. There was a wedding venue license given, there was an event center license given, and there was a food service license given, or were the two combined? Was the event and food service combined? Or were they three separate?
The event was issued a business license. It's advertised as providing food service.
Okay, all right, so it's two, there were 2 licenses given. Well, there's actually 3.
3,
One for the
yeah.
tourist lodging, 1 unit, and then there was a business license given for the wedding venue and event center. The 1-unit tourist lodging has been approved and was voted on by the Planning Commission. There was, for some reason, an admin error that allowed this property to then get a wedding venue and an event center business license. Neither of those, go ahead, Kyle.
Sorry, as well as an additional
As well as
tourist-
the additional tourist lodging unit.
Yeah.
So they went from 1 to 2. None of those things have been approved by planning. There was no application for the change. And a couple of things to note. In Ordinance 2311, several of you were on the Planning Commission when you determined that there would be no more tourist lodging in R2 and R3. Within that ordinance, there is verbiage that states that there is no such use as an event center in R2 residential. So originally, there was an extra category that said tourist lodging, but because you no longer allow that, or because the city no longer allows that, then that isn't in there. But there is also no use in there for event center. There is in R2 an opportunity for a property to get a wedding venue, as long as there's an application and a CUP is voted on by Planning Commission in R2. So just kind of some background there. Does everybody understand those items? So I'm going to ask, okay, thank you, for the property owner to come up, and I'm really trying to, I know there were letters that were sent out by Kyle through the city to remedy and come up with a plan as to some of these issues that are on this list. So I'm going to give you some time just to kind of explain your situation and tell us, number one, whether or not this is that you understand this was licensed as a 1 unit, and that there are some restrictions to that. You can't say it's a 2 unit, you can't say it's a 3 unit, and things like that. So go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Matt Bishop. I'm an attorney. I represent Ms. Athey. And before
You'll have to speak closer to the mic, sorry.
I'm sorry. My name is Matt Bishop. I'm an attorney. I represent Ms. Athey. Before I started, I wanted to say one thing about Kyle. I disagree certainly with his recommendation, but I work with a lot of government agencies and sue some government agencies occasionally, and they hide the ball. Kyle's been very forthright and very straightforward, and we've been able to have a lot of good communication about these issues, and I just want to commend him for that, though, as I said, I certainly disagree with his recommendation. When I first was approached about this, the first thing I did was go to the code. Now, granted, in the past when I've worked with Eureka and in Eureka, the code ordinance don't always make it online very quickly, so I'm relying on Unicode, so feel free to correct me. But as I read it, 14.0808, G says revocation of conditional use permit. The city may revoke a conditional use permit for violation of any condition of the permit. And so I went and I looked at the permit, and the permit says tourist lodging, zone, I can't make that out, but number of units 1. So I understand those to be the conditions.
It's R2.
R2.
Correct.
So I understand the conditions are tourist lodging, 1 unit. So as I went down the list, and I'd like to start at the bottom first.
Okay, so you're on which letter? F?
F, E, and D, and I'll do those together.
Okay.
It is correct that Ms. Athey obtained a business license. She put the cart before the horse. She certainly intended to be here before a CUP. The city took her money, issued the license. She has not leased the property for a wedding venue, an event center, or sold food from it. She has simply gotten a license. And so there is no actual violation, and no condition in there says you can't go get a business license. So those three, and I believe, if Kyle can correct me, I believe that money is being returned because it was determined the city official issued it in error. They're pulling back the license, returning her money. Either way, I believe the fact that she got a license, if she didn't actually use it, isn't really a violation, certainly of the conditions. The next one is C.
Okay, before you go on to,
Sure.
just before you go any further on those, in our packet, we do have information here regarding whether or not the individual is intending to rent the actual location for a wedding venue or whatever. We've got several listings that do state that property, even though it hasn't been, it is available to rent according to the actual advertising that has been placed out there. So we've got a listing that is on the Chamber of Commerce website. And if you'll give me just a second, I'll get to that information here, if I can get through my... All right, so I've got Eureka Springs Visitor Guide. We've got, how do you say the name of your property? Jarchow? Okay, so that location is listed as a meeting and convention, as having, let's see, it has one meeting room, 1,200 square feet. It will accommodate 50 people, and it says, yes, it does provide food service. So there is that item here as well. So I think there's another one in here for weddings as well, and I'm thinking that there was another one that stated that you could have up to 50 guests. So whether or not it has been rented, we can't prove that. We're not, demanding that everything be listed with the city and say, okay, I did this many weddings or this many events. It is listed. This is Eureka Springs Weddings, this on this website, and it says, hello and welcome to Jarchow House. We look forward to hosting your wedding reception in our quaint 1940s three-bedroom home on 4 acres, just 5 minutes from historic downtown. So the advertising is indicating that she intends to, whether or not she's had any or not, based on her, I don't want to say assumption, but based on this information that we have in front of us.
I agree completely. She certainly has.
Okay.
She has not, however, and I think to move forward, number one, I don't think that's a condition of her tourist lodging conditional use permit, that she not advertise in another way. But again, merely advertising, if she made a poor decision to advertise something she couldn't do, that's on her. It's not a violation of her conditional use permit to put out advertising any more than it's a violation of someone to, if someone has a business in town and they are, they get a judgment against them for fraud.
The conditional use permit, though, is for one-unit tourist lodging. It is not for weddings, as she has advertised, and it's not for events.
Exactly, but she
Correct.
has not used it for those purposes.
Okay.
And so that's why we don't believe it's a violation.
Okay. All right, you're moving on to what, number C?
C, I was going to C, change of use from one-unit tourist lodging to two-unit tourist lodging. I don't know if that's related to the clerical error, but she has not used the property for a two-unit tourist lodging. I think the confusion may arise from the fact that it's a two-bedroom unit. Nothing in your code restricts a unit, and I think I saw that you had that on the agenda at one point, maybe pulled off. But your code doesn't state how many bedrooms is in a unit. And so in the absence of a specific statement, I think the burden is on the government to show, in this case the Planning Commission, to show that she has violated according to their ordinances.
If you'll give me just a second, I'll find the information here in my packet.
Sure.
And if I can figure out where it is. One of the advertisements that is out there does advertise that it is a three-bedroom.
Okay.
Let's see. Cal, where's the,
It's the Airbnb
no,
website.
where's the code I'm looking for? Yeah, there's that one that had 3 bedrooms, but I'm looking for the code that you had sent, or was that in my book?
Which one are you looking for?
For the new ordinance 2311. And I apologize.
Oh, that's,
Can I ask a question while you guys are looking?
Sure.
Is this I was not here for this application initially, but.
You're going to have to speak up
Sorry,
into
I was
your
not
mic.
here for the original approval or anything. Is this building in question the original house used? It hasn't switched to another building on the property? It's the house that was approved as one unit to be rented out as a whole house?
correct.
Okay.
Okay, so in ordinance 2311, it does state that 17 Breezy Point is an existing conditional use permit, and it is tourist lodging. Obviously, we know that tourist lodging is not allowed anymore, and when I say not allowed, there will be no new licenses issued but but properties that currently have those designation as a tourist lodging and have a CUP are listed here. In that particular ordinance, 2311, there is a description of a rental short-term. So I'll read this to you. The rental or lease of a property or hold on, let me start over. A rental for short-term. It says the rental or lease of a property or 2 or less sleeping units within a property for a period of 29 consecutive nights or less where rental payments and taxes owed accrue on a nightly basis, or 2, a property or 2 or less sleeping units within a property for an agreed period of time in monthly 30-day increments where rental payments and taxes owed are due in monthly installments for a monthly rental period. So when I read that, regardless of whether or not we're saying it's a unit or it's saying a bedroom, in this particular case, the way that this tourist lodging or short-term rental is, in my understanding of the way that that ordinance was written, was that it is a property, it's considered a property, whether or not that's considered a unit or it's considered a bedroom. It says a property or 2 or less sleeping units within a property. So some of the reason why that this show cause is because we've got advertising out there for 3 bedrooms, we've got advertising out there for 2 bedrooms, and then it is my understanding that there were conversations between, that were held, I guess, Kyle, in your office, as to whether or not that property had changed use from a tourist lodging CUP to a long-term rental. So anytime those kinds of things go on at a property, we have to go ahead and do a show cause, because we're either going to establish whether or not this is still a tourist lodging or whether or not it is a long-term rental. They're entirely 2 different things. So based on the conversations that Kyle believes he had, he was told that there is a long-term renter. There's 2 buildings on the property, correct?
Correct.
And, okay, one is a home that has 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms?
3.
Has 3 bedrooms. And then there was another unit that was purchased, or another unit that was built, that my understanding was that was what the original 1-unit tourist lodging was issued to. Whether or not, I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't have all of the information. All I'm saying is that we've got advertising out there for 3 units, 2 units, whatever. We've got 1 unit, we know how the ordinance reads, and then we've got the question as to whether or not this is actually a long-term rental or it's a short-term rental, because there are rules that apply to each of those. So at this time, I'd like to ask, is this, knowing that this is on recording and everything, is this a long-term rental or a short-term rental?
When you say this, I want to answer that very specifically.
The
The
particular
house.
the CUP, I need to know whether or not it's a short-term rental or it's being used as a long-term rental. And again, I'm going back to what I understand to be the small house was issued the 1-unit tourist lodging CUP.
That was incorrect then. Whoever
And you're saying
gave you
that's
that
incorrect in
understanding.
the paperwork, or you're saying that's incorrect based on the original meeting, or based on what you were told by the property owner?
The paperwork is silent on it. The paperwork merely says tourist lodging 1 unit. It does not specify any particular building. The way the property is used and has always been used was the main house was used as a tourist lodging. The other house was used the smaller house was used for a long-term rental, both of which are permitted under the terms of the CUP. There is no long-term CUP because it was our understanding she did not need one for that. So she has a tourist lodging CUP.
Correct.
It has been used. It was 2 bedrooms while she used the master. When she started leasing the whole property, it became a 3-bedroom. But ordinance number 2311 is relatively new, isn't it? The last month or 2?
Correct.
Okay. So
Well, it was 2021? Was it 2021 or 2022?
It's over a year old.
Oh, is it over a year old?
Yeah.
The definition of tourist lodging in your code is dwelling in which sleeping accommodations are provided for and offered to transient guests. That's what's happened. It has nothing regarding to bedrooms. That's all it says. So she has one tourist lodging. She's always had one tourist lodging. Her CUP authorizes her to have one tourist lodging, and that has not changed. The smaller house you spoke of was installed after the CUP was issued. So when she applied, she was applying for the house that is and has always been used as a CUP, or as a tourist lodging. So I guess we've addressed B as well, B and C there.
B and C.
Yes, and that leaves us with A, which is noncompliance with building code requirements. While I think that's important, the Eureka Springs Code has a process for building code violations, how to correct them, what they are, and what you're supposed to do. There is nothing in the CUP itself that says a building code violation can cause it to be revoked. My client has had contractor issues, and I've spoken with the contractor. We are working with them to work them out, particularly on the roof on her property. She has had some other issues I saw in there. One of them even involved a city street, but I've never seen the city street marked, so I don't know. There's an allegation she's over it, in it, but there's no marking. Her own surveyor says she is not. So, but again, that's over here in building code violations, which have their own scheme of enforcement. Nothing in the CUP regulations say that a building code violation is grounds for revocation.
I will throw out there, tourist lodging is required to have a certificate of occupancy, which there does not seem to be a record for.
And if there's not a record for it, we certainly have to deal with that. I don't know that there ever wasn't because it was 2021. I don't know if it was part of our application, but if that's required, it was required at the time of the application. It presumably was presented because it was approved.
Okay. Parking on this particular property, was it two spots or three?
So it was required to have one with the application.
One with the application? Was there any existing parking?
Prior to the application?
I
I'm
mean, we've
not.
got two buildings, so I'm just asking.
Yeah, that was before my time here.
I know we're going back a couple years, but were you notified after you received your CUP approval by the city clerk at the time that you were required to receive a certificate of occupancy prior to getting your business license?
No, ma'am, I was not.
And you were issued a business license regardless of not turning that into her?
It was never brought up.
Do you have a business license in addition to your CUP?
For the tourist lodging?
Yes.
I have a business license, yes.
So that would have been issued by the clerk at the time. That's concerning to me because she is required to have the certificate of occupancy before she issues that.
Correct. We have had a change in our city clerks.
I know, we have a new
And so
one, but I'm just
I don't
saying.
have the answer for you on that. Unfortunately, this is what, it's very, very important that we do our paperwork correctly.
Yes.
So, and like I said, that those individuals are not here, so I can't.
Well, I just wonder where that leaves us, is my concern. As a voting board of just citizens, do we even have grounds to speak on this? It's very convoluted. That worries me. Tom, maybe
Well,
you can-
once we're done with this meeting, Kyle can get with the city clerk, the current city clerk, and notify or at least request that a certificate of occupancy be done.
Okay.
We know that we have a CUP for one unit. That is a legitimate, approved
Correct.
unit. The other items that are on the list, the events and the wedding, none of that has been applied for. None of that has been approved by the Planning Commission. There is obviously parking requirements for that tourist lodging. I don't know if any of you have driven back there, but it's basically a gravel road. So I'm sure the reason why that there was at least one parking place permitted was because they had the space there. There is no room on that road, based on how narrow it is, for cars to be parking up and down that particular street. So Does anybody have any other questions for the individuals here that are representing the property?
I'm just a little concerned about the advertisement that you put out for the weddings and the different events. I mean, is there, obviously, they're in publications that, you know, maybe once a year or whatever, but I'm wondering are you not going to be doing any of those things?
We understand, and we'll be submitting a CUP for those. We have to resolve some parking issues first, as you've certainly alluded to. She's got a 100-foot driveway and a garage, so plenty for what she has. But we have to deal with some parking issues, and we're working through those, and we'll be submitting, hopefully soon, a CUP to you for those other things.
Just remember, though, that there is no event CUP in an R2 residential zone.
I understand
Okay.
that. Thank you. Thank you very much for reminding us.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we're here today to figure out whether or not we're going to continue with this one-unit tourist lodging. They have stated that this is a tourist lodging, not a long-term rental. So that CUP is still in play. So if nobody else has any questions, I would say that our motion should be that we vote to not do a revocate, or to not, I guess rescind, yeah, this tourist lodging. And then we can vote by roll call on that particular motion. Unless somebody else has a question. So we'll vote to not rescind it, leave it as is, as a one-unit tourist lodging. We'll do a roll call vote. You've got a yes or you've got a no, and then we'll go from there. The other things that are on this list, obviously the code enforcer, Jacob, will deal with the building code requirements that are outstanding as of now. We should be sending a letter to the city clerk to make sure that she has a certificate of occupancy, find out what and why that hasn't been done. The items that are on here that she does not have a CUP for, those are null and void at this point because there's no application and there's been no vote on any of those. My understanding is that the money has been either returned or in the process of being returned for those particular items that she was charged for, and that letter has been sent saying that those are null and void because no application, no vote, and no meeting was held for any of those. Correct, Kyle?
Yes.
Okay, so at this point, I think what we're doing is we're just going to vote that we leave or take away what she currently has, which is a one-unit tourist lodging. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so I need a motion and a second to move forward.
Go ahead.
I make a motion that we don't revoke the conditional use permit at 17 Breezy Point.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, so I've got a motion and I've got a second to not revoke the conditional use permit for one tourist lodging at 17 Breezy Point.
So just to clarify, a yes vote is to let them...
Not revoke.
Okay. All right. Peter?
I abstain.
You
I want to abstain.
abstain.
Joe?
I'm going to abstain.
Tom?
Yes.
Ferguson?
No.
And Megan?
Abstain.
So we've got one no, we've got one yes, and we have 3 abstained? So it really doesn't matter what I do here? No.
Dead. Motion's dead.
you're
right.
saying no. Or you're not voting?
I guess it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we've got essentially an abstained would be in the no category, correct?
Yes.
So we have 3 abstained and 1 no, so that would be 4 no and 1 yes. The motion was to vote yes if you would like to continue and allow that 1-unit tourist lodging to stay in place, correct? Yes. Okay. So 17 Breezy Point, based on this meeting, based on these votes, has been revoked.
Forgive me, but I have to disagree. My Robert's rules are rusty, but I think to revoke a permit, you need an affirmative motion, and you need an affirmative statement, because I have nothing to appeal at this point. All you have said is, we are not agreeing it should stay in place. So if you're going to take that right away, I think you have to have an affirmative vote to do so.
Yeah, that's right. It needs to be in the affirmative. So the motion would be to,
The motion was to keep it, to not revoke,
so
and
to
it
be
was a yes.
affirmative.
Does that make it a negative, though? Is that the issue?
Yeah, so I
Like-
think the motion would have to be to revoke.
And then take the vote on.
Yeah.
I mean, normally we,
All right.
okay. All
Well,
right, well, we can vote again if you want to restate the,
Sure. I make a motion that we revoke the conditional use permit at 17 Breezy Point.
can you get a second?
Second?
Second.
Anyone have any discussion or anything further?
No, I do have a little discussion. One of the things that is obvious in this is there's been a lot of wrongs, and the old thing, a lot of wrongs don't make a right. But in terms of public safety, given the building violations and the violations annotated by our code officer, I think that it evens the balance towards this not to be continued for public safety.
Does anybody else have any other comments? All right, so roll call, let's vote again.
Peter?
And this is,
Verify.
yeah, your vote yes is to revoke, just so you're clear, based on the motion that was made.
So yes. Joe?
Yes.
Tom?
No.
Ferguson?
Yes.
Megan?
No.
All right, we've got three yeses and 2 nos. So it remains the same. It's still, that license is revoked on 17 Breezy Point. Do we need to do any paperwork on that particular? I think it's a year. Yeah. And Kyle, if they have any additional questions as far as if they can reapply at some point or change the use or anything like that, can you answer those questions for them? Should they send you an additional email or call you?
Yes.
Okay. I'd rather it be in an email, so if we could do it in an email, that would be great.
I'm just saying that's what.
So is there anything for us to sign, Kyle, or?
No.
No, okay. Okay, let's go, our unfinished business, we postponed that unit, short-term rental tourist lodging. Let's go to regular commission business. Approval of the minutes from February 14th. Can I get a motion and a second to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from February 14th.
Second.
Motion to approve and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, number 2 on our discussion is a floor area ratio. And I actually put this on the agenda based on the applications that we had coming from the Rays. So they had a really small, they have a couple really small lots. And as I started thinking about this, I thought to myself, what does our code say? And our code is pretty generic. I'm not sure how it came about or why we have listed in our code that, lots in R1 have to be, 8,000 square feet, and lots in R2 have to be 10,000 square feet, and then R3 has a different set. It started me thinking, why is that necessary? So there is some information that Kyle gave to you that lists or that explains how you calculate a floor area ratio based on the size of a lot. So rather than people come to us with applications for variances on the lot size that they have, if it doesn't fit exactly into the way that our code is written, my thought was, could we pass or have city council update information? Our code would then be updated, whereas we relied on a floor area ratio to determine what size a building could be on a large lot, a small lot, or whatever. It's kind of confusing when you read it, but the overall makes a lot of sense. Meaning, if we could update our codes, we could then do away with variances. When it comes to somebody building on, X square feet of a lot. The only things that I think are important, though, is that we may have, just as a thought, we may say that the FAR on a lot size of 0 to 4,000 square feet is this. On a lot size from 5,000 to, say, 8,000, it's this. And what that allows then is for us to determine, does that include parking? Does that include a garage? Does that include the building itself? So we could wrap all of that in, which then would take care of some of our parking issues as well. We wouldn't have to look at that lot and say, okay, they can put a house this size, but do they have enough parking? So if we included parking, a garage and or parking space for vehicles on that lot, we could include that in our FAR calculation. And then when they come with an application to Kyle, he could say, okay, how big is your lot? Well, this is the size house that you can build on this lot. It would include your garage and your parking. Well, this is the size, they may say, well, this is the size that we want. And it's probably not going to work. Maybe that has to be 2 stories as opposed to 1 story. So there's some additional information to help you make sense of what we're talking about here. The only other thing that I think needs to be considered is that I believe that we should have a minimum in place. So what would a minimum home size be? So there are some, I guess, state guidelines. There are some federal guidelines as to what constitutes a home. I think we probably could all agree that 200 square feet probably doesn't constitute a home if it has a kitchen, a living space, a bathroom, and a sleeping area. So what does that mean? Do we say that a minimum home square footage needs to be 500 square feet? It needs to have a bathroom, it needs to have a kitchen, and it needs to have a bedroom. I'm not saying that we have to know what that is right this moment. I'm just saying that I think there should probably be some minimums there as well. The other side of the conversation is, does my lot, because I've got a 20 square foot lot, does my lot allow me to have more than one building on it, which goes into our long-term rental issue, our tiny home, rental, a long-term renter opportunities for some of our property owners. So my house is maybe 1,200 square feet, maybe my FAR, my calculation for floor area ratio allows me to have more than one building on that lot. And again, I'm just saying this in general, because you may live in residential 1 or you may live in residential 2, and it may not be zoned for some of these things. But does that allow me to maybe put more than one building on my property that can be livable space? So just, I think this is something that we need to really discuss over the next couple meetings and be able to present it to city council so that we can make some changes.
Couldn't we look at, or Kyle, what other cities, towns have done? There may be things that would be good guidelines.
We could, and of the few examples, I think there's a couple, aren't there, from city that I sent you, the links as far as the calculation goes?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and I forwarded those to everybody, so when you get a chance, yeah.
yeah, so I know this is kind of a lot to throw at you.
Right.
And I know we're not going to make a decision tonight. I'd love for everybody to vote to say, let's put something together and at least, start that process. But, all right, so Tom?
Yeah, that was an article in the paper a couple weeks ago. I don't know whether it's Fayetteville or Bentonville, but there was a proposal on 8.7 acres of land that wanted 60,000 retail space, 80,000 commercial space, 140-unit hotel, and 500 multifamily units on 8.7 acres. Now, keep in mind, Jay Guston subdivision,
They're
Pinecrest.
going to go up.
It's only 9 acres, so that was, if you can visualize all that on,
Wow.
that came through us, the subdivision.
sure.
That's the same, a little bit, not much, but,
Yeah.
it didn't pass, but they sent it back because of water retention or whatever. But I
Right.
mean, that's what some cities, I don't know what the zoning was, but it didn't say with the PUD, it didn't talk about parking. But it had to be in there somewhere, but the article didn't, go into detail. But I mean, they were trying to put all that on virtually, less than 9 acres of land.
And what I have read based on this floor area ratio calculation is that, maybe it's a percentage. So, if you've got 8,000 square feet, what is that ratio? Some places are larger, some places it's a smaller ratio. It depends on whether or not you've got 1 story, you've got 2 stories. It also depends, in some cities, what their water system, and some of them were done that way to control how many people were actually on that system. So was it overloading that system? We've got several residential zones in Eureka. I don't know how that would affect that, but there's not a lot of usable lots, empty lots at this point. I mean, we've been discussing 8 and 10 Angus for quite some time. In their case, having an FAR would have saved us a lot of discussion, right? Because they wouldn't have to come to planning for a variance, but they would have gone to Kyle and said, okay, I know that this code is in the code book that says my FAR is this. What does that mean to me? Like, how big of a building can I build? So it would alleviate some of those things. But because we still have lots out there in residential zones, in commercial zones, and we may create something that's different for commercial. But right now, I've just been kind of focused on residential because it's come before us. I think it would make the process easier because then it's based on the lot size, and if we want to wrap in a garage or parking into that, and it alleviates any misunderstandings or.
Well, the only thing I'd say in terms of use the word tiny homes, because I've been trying to figure out if there's a state standard, and apparently in Arkansas there is not.
There's not.
The matter of fact, I was talking to an investor group in Fayetteville about something they were all eager about building tiny homes. And they realized they'd have to build it outside a city, and they'd have to build their own infrastructure to support it. and their own transportation to get people to and from, because it would be in the middle of nowhere. So it kind of blew up. So, and so I don't think the state's even ready for tiny homes yet. But so if we eliminate the term tiny homes and just go to a maybe substandard, the word substandard home or
Well, if we had a minimum.
yeah, minimum size
If
versus.
we have a minimum.
Yeah, versus maximum, yeah, but stay away with the word tiny. I don't think
And
we're
we
ready
may
for that
limit
yet.
it, I mean, we may, if we move forward with this, we may say that we're going to limit it to, in residential zones, to 2 stories,
Okay,
you know?
sure.
I mean, because
Well,
essentially, if somebody wanted to build something that was 5 stories high, and they still met the FAR,
Yeah,
right?
right.
They would be able to do that. So there are some things like that we need
But we did
to
have
at
that
least
one
consider
place
it.
here on Main Street that was just basically a spec for the architect, and now they've got.
Oh, yeah. I did
So
see
it's
that.
been redone, but it's a.
It's a beautiful little
oh, yeah,
place.
But
It's
the term
tiny.
tiny, yeah,
Yes.
little. And so I hate to start seeing those pop up and down on Main Street. That would
Well,
be
there,
kind of.
there is a tiny home subdivision in Rogers, I think the 390 square feet.
Okay.
And it's, I don't know how it got done. I drove by it the other day. It's a dead-end street, kind of like Angus. And they have about 8 on either side of the street. And they have a 390 square foot structure. And beside it, they have one of these metal garages,
Uh-huh.
with the storage in the end of it.
Yeah.
So you have a place, one
Put your
car.
stuff,
And then
yeah.
you got 390 square feet, but you have storage on the end of your garage. And the street was maybe 15 feet wide, and it dead-ended with no cul-de-sac.
Right.
And it was, I mean, it's been built in the last several years in Rogers. I don't know how they got
Well,
it approved,
and I heard about that, so I put a call into Joseph Woods, who was the county judge then, and trying to find out what he could tell me, and he had.
Well, this
I
is
got
this is
back
inside the city limits of Rogers now. I mean, we've been in the,
Yeah.
the zoning,
So it should
but I mean,
be
I don't know how they
inside
got
the
it,
city.
how they got
yet.
approved.
How they get approved, yeah.
For
'cause
such
I
a
can't find
small, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, you couldn't even
Yeah,
back
it has
up.
to
I
do
mean, it was
with
a,
Yeah.
public
dead-end street.
safety thing, and there was an issue about, you've got everything, you're in a fire trap. That's the problem. It's like, so you got to figure out, I mean, I don't know how they do it, so that's the.
So I guess the question really is do you all think that this is something that we should pursue? Do you think it would be beneficial to property owners that they know exactly what size, to what maximum size they can build a property, to what minimum size they can build a property, and encompass our parking and everything into that FAR?
If we were, I think that due diligence as far as getting information about what's going on and, just good information that we could come together and look at that as a group and decide, it would just be helpful to have some guidance, to
Right.
see what, things have already been done before, for me.
Do you feel like it would be beneficial to talk with Jacob
Oh, yeah.
so that he could give his, do you think it would be beneficial for us to have a workshop with city council? Do you think it would be beneficial for us to have a workshop that invited his HDC, city council? Or do you think, or do you all think that it's best to just keep it here and make a presentation to city council?
What keeping with us was maybe Jacob's input, as far
Yeah.
as.
Yes.
Jacob and Kyle's input, and leave out till we kind of get a feel for it. But you have too many people, you just kind of
I
like.
know.
So
So do you think it's worthy of a workshop, or would you like to discuss it, continue to discuss it during our meetings?
Well, I think a workshop would be appropriate at some point, but I think we needed some time for Kyle and perhaps folks to get us some,
Right.
we can do our own
Yep.
due diligence, but
Exactly.
I just think that we don't want to,
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we, I know you've got some information as to kind of absorb what it means, right? Because we've given the extra information. Kyle, if you could mention this to Jacob, and if we could find out if there are any minimum sizes associated with, what's required in a house? I mean, living space, bedroom, bathroom. What does that look like? And are there any state codes that say the minimum square
Yeah.
footage has to be this?
Yeah, if there are any, Jacob would know that, yes.
Okay, and then also within, I mean, because we've got commercial and we've got residential, are there any codes out there that would limit a residential zone from going to 3 stories or 4 stories or 5 stories? So, I don't think there's anything out there right now. I don't believe I've ever read anything that says, you can go 4 stories or 5 stories, or you can't
In our code?
in our code.
So our code has a 35-foot maximum and.
On the frontage or the?
Yeah, and a 2.5 visible stories from the street level
Okay.
are kind of the two that they include in each of the zones.
Is that residential or is that commercial and residential?
I would have to double check on commercial, but it is for residential.
Okay, okay. So if we could get that information put together, and then we'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting, does that work?
I do have one concern. When it comes to, like, if we do the FAR, which I think is a great plan with a minimum and a maximum amount of livable area is what they define in calculating the FAR, would be like how many livable dwellings? Because then we can overload our utilities too in that situation. If we have a lot that's only, like the one I calculated that's 4,300 square feet, they could have up to 1,600 square feet of livable square footage. So they could have what, 4 different, if we say our minimum is 400 square feet, then are we going to have 4 different tiny homes or sub-sized homes that are going to be all connected to septic, all connected to electric, and all connected to water? Is that going to be a concern with in-city ordinances? I think that's something that we have to address too,
Yeah.
so we don't overload our utilities at this point too. I think that's a
Right.
concern.
Yeah, and there may be something, we may have something for commercial and something for residential based on that. So yeah, that is a,
And they're part of the city doesn't have sewer either. You have to put septic tanks
some
in, so that's,
that are on septic, yeah.
Because I definitely would say transitioning into like a different generation of living, there are people that are more acceptable to living in the smaller dwellings, which is nice too, rather than feeling like they have to maximize the size of their home on their lot. They prefer more natural square footage of their land and less in the home itself.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think this will turn into a bigger discussion, but I just thought the way that our code is written right now, where did they come up with, this zone has to be 8,000 square feet and this zone has to be 10,000 square feet? Because we know that a lot of those lot sizes don't exist and they've been on the books for, 100 years. So, anyway, so we'll just, if you could do that, so what it was, talk to Jacob, clarify how many stories we can go in commercial and how many we can go in residential, and then how many, just as a kind of a note for our next meeting, what do we think would be the appropriate number of buildings if they had space for, maybe 4 or 5 buildings, if they, on that size lot, they could put in a 4,000 square foot building. What does that mean? So,
identifying what it means livable
Yeah.
area.
Right.
Right.
Living area.
What is livable area? Yeah.
okay, anybody else have any questions about that?
Good.
Okay, so let's go to Tom. This is something, just as a follow-up, so it doesn't get forgotten, the tree ordinance.
the tree owners kind of got stopped because of the COVID deal.
Make sure you're
And,
close to your mic. So this was pre-COVID.
We were about to go to city council with it when the COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then I got to looking at it again the other day, and we talk about, the question came up about, what tree, whatever. Existing code says any tree in the incorporated city limits is under the tree ordinance. I'm sorry. And I know at the time we intend to leave out the parks and recreation because, they just really are kind of different than than the city as far as what they do especially with the hiking trails now and the bicycle trails and all that. So I did pull this out of this city codes, a definition of what parks and recreation, what they cover. So this is one thing we need to add to our proposed ordinance on trees as far as referencing this. That'll show what we can control as a city and what the parks and recreation can control as far as their property, so we won't overlap them. And then I guess the other thing is just to, have a workshop and go back over it and see if somebody's thought of something since we did this, 3 years ago now. And I have not, I don't know whether Jacob's had a time to look at this. Did we ever send Jacob a copy of this draft or anything at all, Kyle? Or?
I have not sent Jacob a copy of this, and he is out of town for training until Monday. He'll be back.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not, we need to probably let him have his input also in there, since he would be the one administering it. And so, yeah, we I guess need to have maybe just look at it again because some of y'all of course, weren't on the deal, and I think half the city council, I think we had 8 workshops, and the city council was in on 2 or 3 of them, and I think HTC, yeah.
Okay, so the information that you have right now, is this what currently is out there, or is this something that you drafted? That was the proposed.
This is one that's been through 8 workshops.
Okay, so the proposed could go to Jacob.
Yeah.
What about this information with parks?
Well, I just want to say, we need to add that to this draft right here.
Okay, so do you want to, Kyle, do you have this? Or do you even have that on file? That ordinance, that draft?
Yes.
That is the one I sent you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I do have that.
So can you get with Tom and see where this portion of the parks information could be added to what is currently on that draft? And then send it to Jacob? And then we'll put it on our agenda for our next meeting. Does that work? Does that work, Tom?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about this? Okay. All right, let's go on to number 4, which is the residential incentive workshop. And this is Megan.
We did not actually decide as a group last meeting to set a meeting, but it did get posted in the newspaper that we were having one. So we're going to see, do we want to have a workshop on residential incentives on May 9th?
Okay, so we're still thinking possibly on May 9th. And what day is May 9th? Is that a
And
Tuesday?
who would we want to invite to that, city council or the mayor's task force?
Sadie Martin.
Yes.
And what are you hoping to cover in this first workshop?
Well, if we have it this soon, I really want to hear, as a planning commission, what this task force has pitched. It seems as though they've gotten pretty far down the pike, so to speak, with setting up 501c3, working on housing, identifying plots of land that the city owns. They've already done a lot of work. I want to hear more about what's already been done at this point, and then say, how can we as Planning Commission partner that? And then maybe some of the ideas that I brought about, other cities are already offering incentives, would this help? And see if we can kind of merge groups or be supportive or.
Right.
Okay, so do you feel comfortable asking individuals, or would you rather Kyle ask if we can bring those people to present as to where they are in that process?
How does that work? Like, am I allowed, or should you reach out to these people and
So
invite them?
I think being a workshop, it would be appropriate if you want to, since you've already been in conversation with them.
Okay.
But if you want me to, I don't have a problem doing that.
Okay. It
Okay,
might be easier just for timing wise.
Yeah, let me do it.
The next question is, based on your conversations, if they're able to do that, is everybody available on the 9th of May. So our workshop would be at 5 o'clock. So tentatively, we can decide if we want to do a workshop regarding this subject. If something changes, we can always remove it if they're not able to come on the 9th.
We do it 5 o'clock, what you're
Mhm.
saying?
On the 9th,
Because we have a meeting.
because we have a meeting on the 9th at 6. So anybody have any issues as to why they wouldn't be able to be here on the 9th? Okay, so let's tentatively set a workshop for May 9th.
And Kyle, if you could reach out to those people and ask them to present what they've organized so far. And I will try to come with maybe more data on some of those articles I sent to you all already on the specific cities I found that were doing incentivizations and give more data at that time.
Okay. Good, or do you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that also that what I've heard from around the community is like when someone has a property, they're hesitant about doing long-term rental because of maybe one or two bad experiences. But the situation is if we kind of have some guidelines that you have to qualify for to make the list for potential long-term renter, then that way it can kind of bring positive enforcement saying, hey, look, well, I understand, I'm sorry that you had a previous bad tenant, but there's young, active people in the community who are interested in trying to better our community, that this can really help them. And by providing a safe space like that, then it encourages incentive, I believe so.
Might help, I'm piggybacking that exactly, to do something to say if we do a program, an incentivized program, that we can help people screen. As long as they are part of the program. This wouldn't apply to every landlord. It would just be if you're agreeing to whatever's come up with, we can do workshops on how to screen a tenant, what programs there are, backgrounds, credit checks.
Can you, for our workshop, can you put some of those thoughts down on
Yeah.
paper? So that
Yeah.
at least we have them as talking points and we don't, because I don't know what your brain is like, but I have a lot of stuff in it. And if I don't write it down, I will forget it. So does anybody have any other thoughts on that? So as of right now, we're going to set a tentative workshop for residential incentives on May 9th at 5 o'clock. Okay. All right, let's move on to number either 5 or 6, short-term rental and, what, Tom?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Short-term rental and long-term rental building code inspections.
This
Jacob,
came up at city council last night. I mean, you interrupted.
this
Yes, one of the
subject?
city council members said we ought to have, suggested we have an ordinance, that we draft an ordinance saying that long-term rental would be inspected once a year. And then another son of council said, well, maybe we get the building inspector and the fire marshal to do that. Then the mayor said, stop. Jacob is at a meeting Jacob is a meeting all this week in Little Rock talking about codes and that type thing. He said, he said, basically, kind of hold off, and let Jacob get back and tell us, what he found out, at this 5-day meeting. I don't know how you can spend 5 days talking about the codes, but evidently they are.
Probably
So,
different
yeah.
sections of the code.
Yeah, so
probably.
anyway, that's the reason I just said that, they kind of like put that on hold, as far as,
Well,
and I don't know when Jacob wrote this. I mean, I was kind of surprised to see it on here.
So
I
there
think
is the information that Jacob did provide in your packet regarding rentals in building code. Let me see if I can find mine. I did want to kind of piggyback off of this particular topic, though, based on what we had talked about at our last meeting, and that was what you just mentioned, Peter, which is, personally, I think it would be really wonderful if we had got city council involved and had an ordinance that addressed a long-term renter or a renter's bill of rights or something like that. Saying that if you're going to rent long-term in the city, you should have fire extinguishers. They have to be inspected yearly. We do our inspections every year through Marmat. They tag the fire extinguishers and everything. There needs to be smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, if they're necessary based on how that property is heated. Some people say, can we test the water? And then the other is the fire marshal. When that property would need to disclose to that prospective renter when that last inspection was done, the date, and if they passed or failed. So, and there may be some other things too that could be added to that. Obviously, we wouldn't be creating an ordinance over here, we would just be requesting one. The final product would come out of city council.
Yeah.
But I personally believe that we should have something like that.
Yeah.
Now, that's on long term.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens on short term.
I agree. One of the things that I'm concerned about is what's happening in other cities with squatters. And I think in this same thing, when someone is legitimately renting and then they decide, okay, I'm just not going to pay rent anymore and I'm going to stay in the house, then we've got to have some protection of the owner as well. So we've got to, right now, I don't think we have anything like that in the city. As far as somebody wants to stay in a house, then it might take a court order, it might take, I think in one state it's taking 3 years to get an eviction done. So,
Yeah, it is. Now, Jacobs gave you that information, so it's just kind of his checklist. Is this his wish list, or is this or is it a combination of what is already in code?
So I am not clear on that. So he had brought it up at a department heads meeting. The fire marshal was kind of on the same page that they feel like there's a need for something like this, especially for health and safety reasons. And then it was brought up at city council last night. So it seems like everybody's close to being on the same page. But yeah, I think it'll take some figuring out on what exactly that looks like.
Okay, so if you can just go through this list, can we get Jacob to come to our next meeting? Regarding this?
I will invite him.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or any thoughts on this particular item? Okay, all right, so we're going to go ahead and ask that Jacob come to our next meeting regarding short-term, long-term rental inspection checklist. Okay, next item on the list is planning zoning application changes. So the last meeting that we all attended, we received blank copies of all of the applications that are out there for planning. Who did or did not do their homework?
I did not.
Okay, so I did a little bit of homework. Kyle, did you tell me that Ann had submitted some information?
Ann did give me some information. Do you want to hear that first?
Do you have copies of it, or did you have just one copy of it? Or do you just have her email that she sent to you?
Yeah, I just have her notes. We actually met in person.
Okay, so are there a lot of things?
No, so
Okay, so
there's
tell me which application you're looking at, and we'll briefly go through her items, just so we can get an idea of what we're.
So mainly it was the conditional use application, the variance application, and
Was it new build?
let me look here real fast. Conditional use,
Zoning variance?
yeah, zoning variance, and then Board of Zoning Adjustment Appeals
Okay, appeals?
are the three applications that, the questions that are part of that application, she's not really clear on what kind of information that provides. And her concern was the information that's required by city code doesn't seem to be specified in the application for that information.
So an example would be on a conditional use permit?
Yeah, so on the conditional use permit, on the, I think it's the second page,
Yep.
sorry, third page, all those questions, 1 through 7, she does not feel like it's helpful to the decision-making process. Where she pointed that out in City Code 1408.08, there's a list of information that is required in the application presented to planning.
So was her thought that it was redundant because it's already been stated, so why are we asking them to answer these questions?
Yeah,
Because these things are required regardless of how they answer?
Yeah, so, yeah, she feels like it's vague in the questions for the information that we're looking for.
Okay, so as opposed to having questions on here, they should be clear as to what the code says they're required to do.
Yeah, so 1408.08, Section C, conditional use application, there's a list, 1 through 10, of information that should be provided to the commission for consideration of approving or
So-
denying an application.
So those items aren't currently on a checklist?
Right.
So we need to maybe move the requirements that are listed in that, is it an ordinance? In that
Yes.
ordinance to our checklist? When
Yes.
someone has an application?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you guys feel comfortable with doing something like that? Or would you rather review and understand? Or would you rather have a draft put in front of you that explains why this application has been updated based on feedback from commissioners?
Draft would be helpful.
Right.
Okay, so can we take what she has given and update that particular application or applications to include those items on a checklist as opposed to asking an applicant to provide that information? Because they don't really need to, I understand what she's saying. You don't really need to provide the information. We don't need to ask you about it because we've already told you this is what's required. So do you have this? Have you done this as a checklist, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does she have any, what else does she have?
Basically the same thing, different places in city code that what is required for the commission to consider in an application that is not listed on the applications for the conditional use permits, the rezoning permits, and then the zoning variance application.
Okay. So if you can get with Ann on that, and then we can come up with a draft on those particular ones. The only thing that I had was that a variance application may not be necessary if we do an FAR, if we do that down the road. The other thing is, based on a recent application that we had discussions about, was the street wide enough? Could emergency vehicles get down the street? Has the code enforcement approved of this? You know, has HDC, so approvals that we think we might need. Can this particular property withstand X number of people on public works system? You know, things like that.
Yeah, and that was
those should
actually
be-
brought up in department heads meeting. One of them suggested maybe there's a section that all department heads can sign off
Sign
on.
off.
So if they're requiring something, it gives them the opportunity to check it out. If they're not requiring
Yes.
anything, they can just sign off on it.
So that way, when it comes to us, we're not
already got
asking all
checks,
of
it's
those
already done,
questions.
yeah. Right. Yeah.
We know that those things have already been,
Right.
or that particular application has already been approved
Right.
by the city, and they've put their signature on it, So they are legally
And then the clerk has
liable
got a signature
for
there that
that.
says, I've got the occupational.
Yes.
Or what are the?
So do you guys feel comfortable
Yeah,
with
sure.
adding that type of thing to, I don't know if we need it on every application, but I think
You
the
could even
majority of
require
them.
it on everyone. This is really common in other cities.
Right.
Like engineering firms and things like that. You have to call and say, you know, work with the would-be Jacob at other cities and say
Yeah.
what process. And a lot of times they just pass it off, even if it doesn't need fire, it will get a signature from the fire marshal.
Right.
Right.
And just say, your whole application needs to go through. It doesn't have to cost anything, or
Right.
it could be $20, or.
I just would, I would rather we have clean applications and we don't 20 years from now have the poor planning commission sitting here going, well, what did they really mean when they approved this? Or what did
Why
they
is it missing
do? Or
this? Or-
go ask Joe that's lived here for 50 years what they
Yeah,
did
yeah,
back then.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
do an application that is a good application so that somebody down the road can historically look at it and understand exactly
What happened?
what happened.
Right.
And that it's, maybe, that it was actually legally permitted.
Right.
So, so if we could make those updates and then come back with draft for our next meeting, that would be fantastic. Okay, so we're going to have the applications back on our agenda for next meeting in draft form based on the additions that we talked about at this meeting. Okay, anybody else have anything on that? Okay. This is Kyle, because for some reason, there is, unfortunately, when we read through the code books, we find things that maybe don't necessarily make sense, and we need clarification. So in this particular instance, you were reading some information on procedure. Well, go ahead and explain what your issue was.
Came across an instance where a non-conforming use has been called into question. In city ordinance, it states, any failure to do so could result in the loss of a non-conforming use status at the discretion of the city. Other than that, there's no guidelines for what that procedure looks like. I kind of went to some of the people who have been here with the city for a significant amount of time. There's not really any institutional memory on the last time that the city has revoked an LNC status. The one that was suggested when I pulled out that file, there's no documentation on how that process worked or even what the decision was. And so I even called the city attorney. He's not aware of any policy or procedure for that to take place. And so I'm just wondering if anybody here has been involved with that procedure, if it's something that is initiated at this table or just goes directly to city council.
Okay, where is the exact wording that you just read?
Yeah, so it is.
This paper that he gave us that looks like code, but the first one says 421.
Let me go to the packet here in 1 second.
I mean, I know it goes through change of use, it goes through, change either
Yeah, so.
an enlargement or an alteration.
On your packet, page 422, section F, no enlargement or alterations. A non-conforming structure may not be enlarged or altered. However, any non-conforming structure shall be kept maintained in a good state of repair at all times. Any failure to do so could result in the loss of non-conforming use status at the discretion of the city.
Okay, so your question is on if planning commission were to be put in this position, or if the city were to be put in this position, what are the procedures And how does this commission play into this? Because right now, it doesn't say that it is the responsibility of planning.
Right.
Okay. So, and you said you've heard of one property
Yes.
that this has happened to?
Yes.
And have you done your research to find out what procedure they went through and/or who handled it?
So the person I talked to, their recollection was it was handled at planning, but there's no paperwork or anything like that in the property file.
Okay, so really honestly, at this point, we have no procedure and we don't know who handles it. Okay, so, we're either going to need to create a procedure and say we own it, or we're going to say, who does this belong to? And that would be asked of, I would think that would have to be asked of city council, wouldn't it?
That would make sense to me. Yeah.
I mean, when you all read this, does that feel like it doesn't really say it's a planning responsibility?
I agree.
Or do you just
I think
want
it should be
clarification?
pitched. I think, can you go to city council and say, planning has asked you to interpret this?
Well, we would
You
have
know.
to request that they have that discussion, because then they would have to vote as to who,
Yeah, I think it should be their responsibility to assign it to a group, though. If that's
Okay,
even
so-
themselves, it could be themselves. but-
so at this point, if we as a planning commission, and I think we need to vote as a commission
Okay.
to do the ask to city council to determine whose responsibility it is to vote on this particular issue. And then after that's done, then a procedure can be put in place, a formal procedure, right? So, do you understand okay, so do you all feel comfortable voting tonight to make the request for them to make a determination of who's responsible for this particular item?
Yeah.
Whether or not it comes up 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, or 6 months from now, it's not clear in code who is responsible to make this determination. Okay? So can I get a motion and a second to, how are we going to word this? To get a determination on
Clarification
who's-
from city council?
a clarification as to who's responsible for this type of issue?
I make a motion to ask city council to clarify procedure and LNC status process.
Okay, so, and this is related to, let's make sure we reference, are we going to reference the page number in the letter? Or do you have an ordinance that it,
So 140805 is the city or municipal code. Subsection F is where that's.
okay, so
Specified.
140805 subsection F. Do you want to restate your motion?
Okay, I make a motion to request city council to review and assign procedure and LNC status relating to ordinance 1408.05 subsection F.
Okay, so
That
we've
sound
got a
about
motion.
right? And then a second. We need a second.
Oh, a second?
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to go ahead and clarify 140805 subsection F as far as who's responsible. And then at that point, if it comes back to planning, then we can come up with procedures. If it doesn't come back to planning, then it's off our plate. So all those in favor of sending this over to city council signify by saying yes?
Yes.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no? All right, so let's do that. And Kyle, I know I talked to you about this a while ago. Is this something I need to send Or is this something that you can send
Uh,
on behalf of?
So,
Or have you not got clarification?
yeah, so I asked that question today. For something to appear on the city council agenda, it needs to be either proposed by a council member, the city clerk, or the mayor, and I can ask one of them to bring this up for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. So, agenda setting for May 9th, regular meeting. We know we're tentatively going to have a workshop at 5 o'clock on the residential incentive workshop. So for the agenda, as of right now, let me just run down the list of things that I know that we're going to put on our agenda. I actually want to add something about parking.
Okay.
We're going to add the continued discussion about the FAR ratio. We're going to put the tree ordinance back on our agenda because we're going to have a new draft.
Right.
We're going to ask Jacob to attend and discuss after everybody's had a chance to look at the short-term and long-term inspection checklist. And then we're going to have a draft in front of us and discussion on our applications. Is there anybody else that wants to add something to our meeting?
I think that's plenty.
I was going to say, that's a lot.
I do too.
That's a lot. Okay.
And I will ask, I'm going to add one other item because I think this is becoming these are becoming long drawn out meetings. Is that we can have a discussion at our next meeting about possibly going back to 2 meetings a month as opposed to 1. And you don't have to say anything now.
Okay.
We'll vote on it. You guys get to decide if you want it or you don't want it. But let's at least have that quick discussion. Anybody else have anything they want to add to the agenda? Okay, let's go to commissioner comments, and we'll start on this side. So Megan, you want to go first?
I have nothing.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention was, tonight where we had to revoke that was an obvious indication that we've got parts of our town that are just not in any kind of standard compliance, and we really need to, as a commission, try to identify those, and let's see if we can head it off before it comes to the table, because public safety is really important, and for us to find out that without that situation, the fire trucks wouldn't have been able to turn around, it's kind of scary. So hopefully we won't have any other situations like that in town. That's all.
Tom?
Well, I guess I'll talk about Washington Street again. There was a meeting at City Council where Jacob was going to defend himself as why he did what he did on the property down there after the fire. He could not come that night, but the City Council and the mayor decided to let all the people there have their comments without him being there. And several people got up, everyone complained about what a horrible job the new building inspector was doing, and he wasn't qualified and this and that and the other. And I just made a comment that I thought that was somewhat unfair. Then I've heard comments that, well, why would you even get involved with that? And shortly after the fire, I was driving down Washington Street, and there was a construction dumpster out front. So I knew it was a non-conforming use. I went by and talked to the planning person at that time. I said, he said, yes, it was a non-conforming use. I said, well, is the property more than 51% destroyed? He said, I don't know. And I asked her why. She said, because I can't get the building inspector to tell me. He won't inspect it. And then that's the last I knew about it. The next thing I know, we got a new building inspector, and then he has some issues with the property. But I did have a right to ask why the property was not inspected and why construction was started before the building inspector evidently issued his building permit. So that's it.
Joe?
No.
Peter?
No comments.
All right, so I'm just going to add a little bit to what our discussion was tonight. I do thank you all for kind of putting up with this meeting, but they are getting long. But when we asked for the moratorium on B&Bs, and when you all got rid of tourist lodging and different things like that. There's a lot that goes into each and every one of these applications. And I really do believe that we as a planning commission are trying to make those applications better. I know we've had people that have come here, they've had to come back, we've had to sort through, Kyle, I know, has sorted through mounds of paperwork trying to figure out how something was done years ago, or maybe something wasn't done years ago. It's so important that we get and have our paperwork correct, so that, like I said, if somebody 50 years down the road has to look up that information, they can read it and they know exactly what it is. And I know sometimes things don't get permitted in Eureka Springs correctly. I mean, obviously, we're finding them. And I know some things don't get permitted in Eureka Springs because maybe, somebody asks somebody and they say, oh, yeah, it's always been used that way. As a planning commission, we should make sure that our applications are correct and that they have the information on them so that somebody in the future can read them. But we should always look at something, even though it might seem small, make sure we permit it so that it's correct, it's done, there's no questions as to what it is or how it's supposed to be used. I think that's really important for this commission to do, to make sure that those applications and those permits are done correctly. So, I thank you guys for, being here and talking about these things, because there are things that we do need to fix. And hopefully this year we can get a lot of these things out of the way. So, anyway. Kyle, do you have anything else to add to the meeting?
Thank you, everybody, for everything that you do. And that's all I have.
Okay, so can I get a motion and a second?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.